Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. We are talking about selling co-managed IT opportunities. And with us today is Reese Orman from Techvera. And
Hey,
you can introduce yourself after me because I'm
there you go.
So again, I'm the CEO of Managed Sales Pros. We've been supporting managed service providers for the last 7 years. We specialize in helping companies with at least 1 million in annual recurring revenue increase their monthly recurring revenue so they can get to $5 million in annual recurring revenue. That's our sweet spot. So we focus on helping people find opportunities between 20 and 50 seats. We don't do a lot of co-managed. So I wanted to invite someone here today to talk about how they were effectively prospecting for co-managed opportunities and build out a little bit of a framework for those of you who are trying to create process within your companies that are targeting co-managed opportunities. So my experience prior to starting Managed Sales Pros was sales development for larger enterprise software companies. So companies with a significant number of sales reps who were targeting organizations that had a minimum of 500 users. So a lot of this comes from my background on how to sell into larger companies. And then Reese, of course, is coming in to talk about the real life practical applications of looking for co-managed opportunities. So Reese, I will let you introduce yourself. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sure. Pleasure to be here, Carrie. Hello, everyone. My name is Reese Orman. I'm the CEO of Techvera. We're an MSP based in Denton, Texas, North Texas area, about 30 minutes outside of Dallas. Got a 20-person team here. Did a couple million in revenue last year, very growth-oriented, and have a few verticals that we focus in. But one of the things that we have really put a lot of emphasis in over the last 6 months and moving forward is going after, we're becoming big game hunters here, Carrie, right? So we have started exploring co-managed opportunities. We've won a few of these. We have fell on our face a few times on a few of these, but we're learning the ropes, and this is a really intriguing area. So my goal with this today is to give our audience some feedback on some of the things that we've done in prospecting. And I think, Carrie, you're going to hit on a lot of the points where that traditional prospecting versus co-managed prospecting differ. And I'll be happy to share my experience and answer questions for our audience here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, for those of you who are watching this on demand at a later date, obviously you can't ask questions live, but Reese's contact information and my contact information will be available. And those of you who are watching live, you'll note that there is a chat panel and a questions panel. Now, the questions panel on this platform is kind of interesting. If you ask a question, Reese can click the button and answer it live, or he can ignore it and answer it at the end of the content. So if you're going to ask a question in the panel, please let us know which person you are asking the question to so that they know whether to take that question or parlay it over to the other person. So I want to talk about the different stages in the sales process and how it differs from our normal, 20 to 50 seat sweet spot and co-managed opportunities, which are generally in the 200 seat and higher space. So we're talking about finding those opportunities. So looking for the suspects to begin with, qualifying those leads. So now how we've converted them from suspects to prospects. We know who they are. We know how big they are. We know what vertical they're in. We know that there may or may not be an opportunity based on what they're already doing. And they have a reasonable budget for what it is that we want to sell them. And since nothing really happens overnight in a displacement environment like managed services, we want to talk about how do you nurture that opportunity so that you are, first in line to throw your hat in the ring when they're ready to change what they're doing. So the big difference in nurturing is normally when we're prospecting for managed services opportunities, we're targeting people who are already buying managed services and they're already paying an equivalent amount. So your best prospects in that space are the ones that are already buying from someone else. Co-managed becomes a disruption sale where they likely aren't already outsourcing to another third-party provider. They probably haven't considered the fact that they can hire an external firm to take over some of the responsibilities of the day-to-day operations of their IT department. So you have to come in and educate them. So the sales cycle looks significantly different when the lion's share of the sales process is education. With a smaller managed services opportunity, they know what tech support is, they're already buying it, and they know how much they want to spend on it. So you don't have to educate them. It's pretty much a, hey, do you need this or don't you? No, you don't? Okay, when might you? Oh, that time? Okay, we're going to create a process to nurture those opportunities. Whereas here, the lion's share of the work starts at, what do you mean? And goes all the way through to elaborate quotes and scope of work that may include some things for some organizations and be completely different for others. So if you think about your current managed services offering, you likely either have a tiered offering, a best, better, not as good, or you sell one thing and maybe you do project work and maybe you don't. If you're going into the co-managed space, you're going to have to plan a little bit better than that. You don't just get the option of saying, hey, buy this one.
Yes.
Now you've got to create something that they want to buy, something that will be useful and attractive to them. So Reese, it sounds like you have a little bit to share there. So why don't we start there?
Sure. That's one point that you hit on that I did want to echo there, is that we're a big shop on, we've got a single managed offering for our traditional managed service engagements. But it's been my experience with these co-managed opportunities that the only thing standard about them is that each one is going to be custom and tailored. Like, that's the only recurring pattern that you're going to see. You could have a co-managed prospect here that wants one security widget. You could have another one that is really struggling and could use your entire tool stack extended to them. And there's going to be a lot in between. And so taking those, being very open-minded to how you're going to work with those, and to be equipped to be open-minded at that level, I think you do have to. I think we were talking about this a little bit before the call, Carrie. I mean, to get into that co-managed realm, you've got to have all your ducks in a row, right? That's not something you want to come out as a green MSP and start swinging for the fences with.
Yeah. So let's talk about what are the things that you should have achieved, or, I mean, how long is a piece of string? But we get a lot of calls from MSPs that want us to help them build their sales process or do their sales prospecting for them. They're like, oh, okay, well, we want to sign companies with between 100 and 500 users. I'm like, oh, great. Well, how big's your company? Oh, well, we're a $500,000 MSP. I'm like, okay, great. What are you going to do with that 100-seat opportunity when you close it? So it's something to think about is your company prepared to, one, completely change the processes that you just spent years developing? So when I think about our company, for example, when we started our business, we were like, we would take anybody that wanted telemarketing, they got telemarketing, right? Whether they were a good fit, a bad fit, whether they were an IT provider or not. And then eventually we kind of shifted. We recognized the opportunity that was in the managed services space. We went exclusively after that. And then when we started getting tapped by vendors to do their outbound calling, we had to change how we approached things, right? Because my MSP clients will pay me in advance of services rendered, and Cisco will not, right? So now all of a sudden I'm dealing with 90-day terms and enormous projects, things where if they don't pay me on time, I will very likely not be able to make payroll, right? If I've got a 10-seat call center opportunity where I've custom built out a program for them, if all of a sudden that just goes another 90 days into arrears, I am in a lot of trouble, right? So you just spent a lot of time standardizing everything. You built out processes, and we've all agreed, right? Like, we don't take anything out of scope. And that's how you made the jump to that $2-3 million mark. You didn't take projects out of scope. You standardized everything. And now Reese is coming along to tell you that you got to unravel all of that. So,
and Carrie, the other thing I want to say on that is, in reflecting on where you're at in your sales process with your existing efforts, I've got a sales team that we're building. I have someone in that seat and have had people in that seat before that could take a deal through that full cycle, right? Maybe they need some back-end sales engineering or some back-end coaching on it, but they can take that deal cradle to grave and account manage it. It's been my experience with these co-managed deals. Unless you've got a seasoned sales guy that knows your business and knows the industry, this is going to be a principal-led sell. And I'm here to tell you that you can do this all the way up to being a $10 million MSP. I have peers that do it, right? So that's the magic of this, is that now you're coming to the table as a successful entrepreneur with an IT firm that does exactly what they're needing. And there's a conversation to be had. Now, that conversation is going to take several layers and several different people to get to. But if you can get to leadership and you're bringing all this to the table, we talked about this. Once you get at bat and you have everything in your favor, these deals can really expand in their scope and the breadth of the work that you're doing for them. It's just getting to the plate. It's a little different.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we don't like to do it is that it takes a significantly longer period of time just to identify who the players are and how it's going to happen. So looking at, okay, these three people are going to be involved, and one of them is diametrically opposed to the idea of you coming in and potentially displacing some of their staff, for example. So think about a territorial IT manager who's got a couple of junior guys underneath him, and the company's considering now bringing in a third-party firm. They're going to fight you on it. So you don't always have the luxury of an enthusiastic buyer. You might have one person really super engaged with the idea of bringing in a co-managed company, and everyone else is like, oh no, we know how this is going to go down. This happened at my last firm and we all got fired. And now there's like fire in the basement of this business, and you're getting pushback when originally you could get this all the way to the finish line and it could fall right out the bottom.
Yes, Carrie, like when you're talking to that business owner of the 30, 40 user shop and you're getting to have that connection and there's an active need, I mean, they like hitting the gas quick, right? If you try to hit the gas like that, once you've got your foot in the door on these co-managed deals, and I can tell you firsthand, if you go too fast, you're going to scare them off, because exactly what you're talking about. We are coming in and disrupting what's going on. We could be displacing if the messaging's not right. And it just has to be handled very, you got to tread lightly in some of those spots. There was a couple of questions I wanted to answer, if that was cool with you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Cool. So my buddy Mario here, D. Maricantonio, sorry, my bud here, asked, are you typically trying to bake in some MRR product service with each co-managed deal, assuming it could be lower MRR than SMB and heavier on projects and licenses? Absolutely. So often what I'm finding, Mario, with these deals is we're leading with more product SKUs and one-off services to complement their existing platform than anything else. So the first couple of co-managed deals that we've acquired were 365 cells. They were G Suite conversions. Maybe they were a 365 cell, and then we added an email security stack over the top of it. Quoting it all out at retail, decent margin on that, very good margin on that email security stack, guys. So third-party spam filtering, phishing, security awareness, email backup and archive.
Huntress.
That's right, Huntress. All the good stuff, guys. So yes, there's definitely ways, and the beauty of that, for our audience here, is this is low overhead. A lot of these tools, those internal IT departments are going to administer right at that point. And there's a lot of ways that you can position those tools, and they don't have to carry. They're not going to have to manage vendors. They're not going to have to vet products. They have a support team behind them if they get their head over their head, right? So, but Mario had also asked, are you typically targeting both the IT leader and CEO, CFO with all prospecting? I go IT leader first on these. I find out who's in charge of IT decision making, and that sometimes does result in taking first calls with the lowest guy on the totem pole in the technical department, the junior admin, the desktop admin, right? Okay, let's take the next call with your direct supervisor. Okay, who's that guy's direct supervisor? Is it the CTO? Cool. Okay, who all is going to be involved in the decision? Is it going to go to a board? It's just slower, and you just have to keep building value up that ladder. But I don't go after the CEO direct. I'd love to hear your thought on that, Carrie, on those co-managed deals.
So typically what I want to do when we go in is I'm going to start with whoever talks to me, right? Whoever's going to take the call is where I'm going to begin. So if I can't get the IT guy on the phone, I am going to go in and try and get in through finance. Like if I can't get in through finance, then I'm going to go try and get into C-suite. And I'm just going to go keep like poking things until somebody finally answers me. And I'm going to qualify the opportunity with anybody that I can, right? So before I waste, reams of time trying to get the CEO of a 500 seat co-managed opportunity on the phone, I'm going to confirm, first of all, that there's any chance in hell this is going to happen to begin with, right? I don't want to spend the next year of my life nurturing an opportunity that may not be qualified. So the first step in the process has to be making sure it's qualified. So any place in the organization that you can do that, that first call is going to tell you whether or not this is even going to be viable. And if that's going to be the lower on the totem pole IT guy, great. If that's going to be the ultimate C-level decision maker, that's fine too. But most of the time, to get a lead qualified, you don't have to wait out the opportunity to talk to the C-suite, right? You're going to find out what the problems are talking to the IT guy. You're going to find out what their environment's like, and you're going to find out what their politics are like, right? You don't ever want to go above someone's head if they can tank the deal for you later.
Yeah, absolutely. And Carrie,
there are minefields there.
Yes, and by going in that direction that I do up the ladder, by the time we get to an open ear at the C-suite, I've got ammunition. We've got stories. We've got anecdotes. We've got challenges. I've got pain that we can talk about, probably stuff that the leadership wasn't even aware of. You got to think these CEOs of these 50 or $100 million organizations, they've been sold to. People try to knock down their door all the time. If you think that you're going to come in cold and they're just going to open up the checkbook, it's rough. It's going to take some warming up.
Well, I like to think about it like this. If I go to if you call me and try and sell us something, I'm not going to buy it without my team's approval, right? Like I'm not just going to arbitrarily buy stuff and make my team use it anymore. I used to do that. I don't do it now. So if I go to my team with an idea, it gets put out to tender, right? Like if I want to change call center platforms, if I go to my director of operations and say, I got a great call from blah, blah, blah today, we're going to change call center platforms. They're going to say, great, we'll go look at this for you. Yep. And we'll come back with a short list. You may not get what you want if you go right after the C-suite, because the C-suite's going to drop it down the ladder, and they're going to send it out for 4 of your competitors to bid on as well. Mm-hmm. But if my team comes to me and says, Carrie, we need to change from Zoho, it's not working for us anymore, we're going to buy Salesforce. They're like, all right.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Like you have to, if they come to me, I do what they want. If I go to them, they go looking for the best, the most cost effective, the most reasonable. And, if you aren't that, then you may not have the opportunity to be at bat any longer.
And Carrie, I think about these things as actually to that point, and something you had mentioned earlier. Abby had left a question on here too, and it's a good point here. Because we talked about unraveling everything, and I think we're being a bit facetious there. If your MSP's built smart, surely you don't have to unravel everything. Smart practices, solid SOP, and company values still apply. Abby, I agree 100%. What I'm thinking about here is that if you've been ingrained in sales in the managed services space for a while, some of the things that I'm learning to do with these co-managed deals are the most counterintuitive. Like,
yes,
that's the unraveling Carrie's referring to there. You're still going to need a sharp help desk. You're still going to have those rollout projects, and the scope of those projects are going to be bigger, and there's more money on the line. So that's why you have to have your stuff together before you tackle these. But to that point there, I hope that clarifies that.
Well, think about when the managed print companies all decided they were also going to be managed service providers, or when one of the big office supply stores decided they were going to go into managed IT, right? They were so used to selling X that they couldn't transition into selling Y. Like traditional office equipment stores struggled to adopt managed print. Managed print companies are struggling to sell managed services. And I know that because large managed print companies are calling us every day, asking us how they build their managed practice. So just because you built a rock solid process to sell one thing, like, doesn't necessarily mean that your rock solid process is going to translate into something else. Otherwise, we'd all be working for Konica Minolta right now, and we're not.
And I can vouch for you there, Carrie, on that regard. I've been in sales training with these managed print guys, and Yes, I will vouch for everything you said there. It's
Yeah.
quite a different sell, a tangible going from those tangible sells and the product kind of oriented stuff to what we're doing. It's night and day.
Yeah, you need a photocopier or you don't. That's not really a business concept you have to explain to anyone. Everyone knows what a photocopier is. Everyone knows what it does. And if you're one of the, major sellers, you've already got the brand recognition necessary to get through the door. Like if you're calling from Xerox, someone's taking your call. Right? You don't have the challenges that, Techvera will have trying to get an audience with an enterprise level organization who's never heard of him before, right? He doesn't have the brand recognition, and he doesn't necessarily have the same sort of clout that larger company will have. So I think one of the challenges the smaller MSPs are going to have as these larger companies continue to go through acquisition is they're going to have branding. They're going to have marketing budgets up the wazoo. And nobody ever wants to work with the number 2 provider in the market, right? So whether your service delivery is the best and the smartest in the world, it's not going to matter to you. It will not matter if you can't compete in sales and marketing. So you built a smart MSP, but now you got to market against somebody who's got a multi-million-dollar a year budget. How are you going to do that? So let's start with the basics. Who are you going to market to? Right? How are you going to find these new prospective buyers? It's not going to be the same people that are already in your database because you haven't traditionally been looking for the larger opportunities. So you got a couple of opportunities. You can build a list, buy a list, and then you have to scrub them prior to prospecting. So I can't stress this one enough. No matter what methodology you want to use for your outbound marketing, whether it's telemarketing or email marketing or digital marketing, if you are marketing to no one nowhere because the list that you bought is complete crap, you're wasting 40 to 50% of your budget all day, every day. So consider how you are going to identify the people that you even want to target to begin with.
I remember years ago being in one of your sessions, Carrie, where you spoke to the accuracy rate of the best lead lists out there. And I think you had said it was somewhere around 40 or 50%. Something like that, right?
Yep. It's gotten worse after COVID, right? Headcount's dropping.
Sure. So that is something that we have definitely bought lists, and there's a huge cleaning, scrubbing that has to happen. But with these co-managed deals, there's a little bit different way that we're going about this, right? We know a couple of verticals that we have identified that are working well for us. You got to think about what kind of live information is out there that you can find that you don't need without Sales Genie or one of these lead sites, right? And so I want to
just that want ads, right? Like if you're looking at any of the major job boards, the first place I'd start is looking for people that have already are losing headcount or replacing.
Yeah, I hope our audience understands that the value prop for what we're doing, whether these companies they're in flux, whether they're up or down in headcount, there is an argument to be made by in terms of augmenting their technical efforts with a strategic partner like one of the MSPs that's on the call here. We're a big 365 shop, right? So if 365 is a wedge issue, Carrie, that I know really that we can do really well with, it's one of the first things I'm going to look at is their MX records. So I told the audience I was going to drop some bombs, sprinkle some gems out there. Look at these MX records of your prospects. Are they hosting their mail on-prem still? Does it resolve to 365? Is it on G Suite? Is it going to Rackspace? Is it going to a spam filter in front of that mail environment? What if it's going to a spam filter that has had some security breaches as of late? Ooh, that's a problem, right? These are really, really useful things to get your foot in the door. So if I find prospects that are on G Suite, and I know natively their industry does better and thrives better in a Microsoft ecosystem, that's going to be the wedge issue that I'm going to start those conversations off with. And it doesn't matter who the contact is. And to Carrie's point, those job ads are good. And usually we avenue through an HR person at that point. But you do have a captive audience because they're HR people. They will listen. And
Oh,
usually,
they're so easy to get on the phone too. HR people are awesome.
so that's a really useful one, ladies and gentlemen. If you can get to get to that department and position yourself properly, if you know that they're on G Suite or XYZ, hey, and I'm not coming in I'm not coming in on that initial call, Carrie, and I'm asking for anything. I'm inviting them to a webinar or something like that. Hey, I saw that you guys were still hosted at Rackspace. We've been working with a lot of partners, getting them in this Microsoft ecosystem. I'm sure you guys have dealt with some of those challenges with that. I'm actually do a training, in a couple of weeks here. I'd love for y'all to join us. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but we get them on the marketing track. I think that's one of the takeaways I got from you a long time ago in talking about webinars and registration and attendees is I used to really sweat having a low attendee rate on webinars. I can tell you post-COVID, those numbers have definitely changed for us.
Mm-hmm.
But getting that email and getting them on your drip campaigns against that effort, that's the real essence to this. And it, to Carrie's point, these sales cycles are longer. It's going to take that initial intro and sending them some info and inviting them to the webinar, and maybe they register and checking on them a month later. Oh, the MX record changed. I see they moved to 365. I should ping them and see how that migration went. I'll give you a hint. It didn't go well if they did it internally.
Every state in America has an HR association, right? If you are not contributing content to anywhere that you could be considered an IT thought leader for the markets that you want to get into, like if you haven't taken advantage of joining and starting to interact with and offering up free content to anybody who'll take it, that is something to start considering now. Because if you can get engaged with HR, another thing about the HR community, we used to have an HR list, and we called it the Golden Goose list, right? It was a list of every senior HR person in Canada at the time. And that list was gold, and they change roles regularly, and they bring the companies that they like along with them. So if you're going to start sending like baked goods out to people, those are the people that you want to get them out to. And just think about networking from a referral standpoint, right? If they're not currently hiring an IT person, but they are hiring a marketing person, and a really good marketing person, that's your first call, right? Call them and say, hey, I noticed you were hiring. I'm not a recruiting company. We're an IT company, but I worked with a great marketer, and I know that they're looking right now, and this is their name. I'd love to introduce you. Here are their skill sets, right? You can be a go-giver in multiple ways that leads you to further conversations. Now, this is a long tail strategy. You're not going to win business from one phone call, but if you become the person that's connecting everyone in your community, you're also going to start being people's first call when they're looking for something. Like, you know what? Reese always knows someone. We should call Reese about this. Eventually, you get invited to the party.
Absolutely.
So that's how we're finding our leads. How are we qualifying them? So there's a big difference between, what's your budget and how many computers do you have, and how do deals happen at this company, right? So you have to do something, we call it organizational mapping or deal flow mapping. A lot of CRMs are set up so that you can do this. Small business CRMs are not, though, right? Because there normally isn't multiple decision makers at a small business company. So if you're using a tool that's intended for small business prospecting, where they're really focused on deals and they're not really focused on accounts, that becomes a bit of a challenge, because for a co-managed opportunity, you're going to want a parent-child nesting setup so that you've got the company, and underneath it, you've got multiple contacts nested, and you can associate the opportunity to a contact or to the company itself. So when managing the data, it becomes a little more cumbersome, and you want to make sure that you go into your CRM and set it up for a different kind of prospecting. And if you're using a small business prospecting solution right now, if you're going to go after co-managed, you got to play like the big boys, right? Even if you aren't, you got to start managing your data like you are.
So, Carrie, to that point, every week when we go through, we try to do our sales admin in the low value times, right? So on Mondays and Fridays, when we're kind of prepping and mapping out the rest of our week, when we're prospecting and looking up those MX records, and I'm adding those prospects to our CRM, I am tagging every one of those prospects that's a Mimecast one. I am tagging every one of them that's a Rackspace one. I am tagging so that in the event, maybe Mimecast has a breach, who knows? And then I can create a list against that tag and start a drip campaign against those prospects, right? So getting granularity to the data, we've used HubSpot, and to your point, I think it does do a good job of keeping the account user separation. We have a marketing person, my salesperson, and me all interoperating in it. And that has been a very helpful part of this, is managing all these different phases of these deals and the marketing, the drip campaigns that go behind them. Because like you said, it is a long.
You could be marketing to 4 different people at the same time in the company, and all of them want to hear something different, right? If you're talking to the CFO, their interests and challenges are different from that IT guy who seriously just wants to take a vacation and doesn't want to deal with resetting passwords all day for the rest of his goddamn life, right? Like, there's a very different priority for each person on the totem pole. You need to understand those requirements before you start marketing blindly to them. You're not sending the same email to everybody on your co-managed drip campaign. And you have to assume that, and I want to say this over and over again, drip marketing is great. But the first thing that you teach any of your clients, what's the first thing you teach a client about security, Reese?
Have multiple layers of it.
And then what do we not do with emails from people that we don't know?
We do not open them.
We certainly don't click on shit in them, right? Like, I get tricked by that free Starbucks Frappuccino from InfoSec every time, and I don't even like Frappuccinos. But right, at some point, email marketing is going to get more and more challenging because we're developing more and more things to prevent email from getting through these different filters and screens. So if you're investing heavily in email marketing right now, and on the other hand, explaining to your clients how important it is that you never open email, like, smart MSPs have already blocked your domain anyway. So.
Yes. Yeah. Carrie, as you say that, I'm thinking here, in some of these conversations, when I've gone up the totem pole to leadership or to a decision maker, we start talking about requirements. What are the industry requirements for you guys? Are you required to do security awareness? Do you even know what it is before you know it would be required? Do you know if your users would be exposed? We'll do phishing sims for prospects. Let's run a 30-day phishing sim for them and see what we can come up with, right?
Yep.
You know,
security risk assessments. Like, there's all kinds of ways to foothold yourself into that opportunity. You don't have to start with replacing their entire anything.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's a small deal or a big deal, you can win that thing one opportunity at a time. So consider what you can sell into. Like, I had a conversation with a very successful MSP out of New York who's selling a sales intelligence platform. Right. So his first point of contact now also includes anyone in marketing and anyone in sales. Right. So you get an opportunity to get into the business any way you can, selling any application that you can. And then you land and expand. So you don't have to go whale hunting every day. Right. And that's the biggest difference, I think, between the smaller opportunities where, I mean, even your whales aren't that whaley. And then there's a big difference between a 75-seat co-managed deal and a 500-seat co-managed deal. So where is your sweet spot going to be? And how are you going to create a talk track that's relevant at both 100 and 500 users? Right. Think about your business at 5 people and then at 30 people and the different problems that you had at each, and now scale that up to 500 and imagine for a minute you have any idea what they're going through, right? We don't. So we have to just assume that they're going to tell us what their problems are.
Absolutely.
So lead mapping, once you figure out the politics and how to navigate, like, okay, here's how we get to this person, here's how we get to this person. This person picks up their phone and this one doesn't. This one likes to be taken out to lunch, so we're going to do that every once in a while. Depending on the city, you're going to talk about need, and you've got to talk about budget at some point. So before you waste all your time chasing after these huge co-managed opportunities, don't be afraid to have that budget conversation right up front. Before you nurture it, is this something they're ever going to spend money on, right? If they're a big organization and they only have 2 people and they don't really care, right? You're not going to convince them otherwise.
You know, Carrie, once that, maybe not in the first call, but by the time I've had the second or third call, I define success in that call as the call wrapping up and the client telling me what the next step is going to be.
Well, that's important on any call. Like that's just sales. Sales 101 is always get the commitment for the next thing. So
sure, but to keep this moving forward, and one of the things I was thinking about as you said that, a lot of times when I'm going after these co-managed deals, these IT guys are hard to get on the phone. And there's context right there. That's a talking point to bring up when you do get them on the phone or an email. Oh yeah, I'm swamped. Oh, I'm buried. I can never answer the phone. I'm best by email. A lot of these guys, we've had much more, albeit a slower cycle. We've had better communication with them through email than you would have when you're trying to sell to a principal of a 20 user firm, right? So that's just something I always think about. Mario had another question for us here. What percentage of co-managed do you focus on compared to old school MSP, SMB deals? Thinking because the sales cycle of co-managed is longer, might be a good time to gradually build co-managed over time. Yeah, so this is something that moving forward, my business development gentleman, that's his time is devoted 80%, I would say, to co-managed prospecting, nurturing, going through this sales cycle. Now, we do have traditional managed service leads coming in. They're coming in through pay-per-click, SEO, referral, speaking gigs, all of that kind of stuff. But I will tell you where my head's at, and it's what we're talking about today. And then this next gentleman Stephen had a question. This might be a good one, Carrie. You to have, when you're going up that totem pole, how do you avoid aggravating the original contact?
So it really depends on how the conversation with the original contact went, right? If the original contact was like abrasive and we're not interested, right? I would just give it like, at that point, you put it on pause and you don't call them again for like 60 days and then you call someone else, right? They're not going to remember talking to you. If you have one initial conversation with somebody who's negative and absolutely opposed to the idea, it's not like they got off the phone and called every person in the company that might make a decision about it and say, make sure you don't talk to Techvera, right? Like they just got off the phone and they went on with their lives and they don't even remember talking to you 30 to 60 days later.
Yes.
So when that initial conversation happens and they're like pushing back against it, great. Now you know that that's not the place that you want to start, but you just wait long enough until they forget the conversation and then you go talk to someone else. People are pitching them constantly, right? They're not going to know if it was Techvera or Joe's IT down the street, right? They're not going to remember who they had the conversation with, even if they remember that they had it.
Carrie, to your point, I'll get an invite for a first appointment, right? And I'll accept it, and I'll go back into HubSpot and look at our deal, and I'll see that my sales guy had called, gotten screened, called, gotten screened. A month later, called, got through, right? So there's definitely times where some of these deals we've hit that front end, and often he spoke to the same person. But to your point, they've been hit up so many times that they forget and they open back up. And to the flip side of that, if you are too noisy, if you don't hit it off right off the bat, sometimes you can slip past a gatekeeper once or twice. But if you're not showing value and moving this conversation forward, they'll chop you off right there, and it's ghosted, right?
Yeah, and remember that you don't know who the gatekeeper is, right? So there's no point in like lying or trying to bully your way through it. Probably the gatekeeper's married to the CEO, so they are your ally. They're not your adversary, and that person probably knows all the dirt, right? Like there's people within the company that know what everybody's doing all the time. If someone's getting fired, HR knows, right? HR knows before anyone else does, right? Like there's lots of ways that you can manage to move through an account without making your original contact angry. But if your original contact isn't the ultimate decision maker or the check writer, like I kind of have a policy here, I'll take a call from anyone, but only once. Right? If you can't sign a check, we're having one conversation. So I don't take calls from the sales reps at MSPs that are trying to avoid doing their own cold calling and they want to find out how much it costs to work with us. Right? I'll take one call from them and I'll tell them to get their boss on the phone. Right? Because until their boss buys in, I'm not spending hours convincing you of the value of our services. If your boss wants to buy it, bring it on. But I'm not here to save you work. I'm here to save him work. So you have to figure out how do you nicely right? So you're on the phone with someone and you realize that this guy's, and I don't want to say it like that, but this guy's nobody. He's not making any decisions. He's not suggesting anything. Like, you've reached someone with no authority at all. And you can't very well say, gotta go, right? Like, you have to have the conversation. So getting as much information as possible out of this person is your best play at the time. And then you're going to sit on it, take that information and craft it into the messaging that you're going to use to target people who can make the decision. But you can't very well say, like, you can't buy anything, I gotta go.
Well, and it's, I think, taking that, so, and that's part of our SOP now, is after those intro calls, Carrie, my sales guy and I hop on a call right after it. We debrief and we talk about all those points. We take all our notes and everything. And we think about, what does the follow-up touch look like? How do we continue to craft that message? And even though those people that are far removed from the decision-making process, you will get on the front end, what they are very close to is the pain of the day-to-day, right? And a lot of times that pain is indicative of some underlying things that we can fix quickly. And this is where I urge everyone to pump the brakes, because if you start talking about rapid change or aggressive kind of a sales process on this, there'll be apprehension and maybe that could go cold. But the way that I avoid aggravating them is by aligning with them. Okay, I get it. We're in the same boat. We're technical people. You're having challenges here. What's the lay of the land look like there? What's going on? What's the initiative for this year? Have y'all been tasked with going to 365, right? Are you retiring an Exchange server? Is there a deadline on it? Is there a budget? And I will tell you, once you take the sales hat off and you become consultative with them, it comes out. It comes out. Once they don't feel guarded, Carrie, on these calls, we get so much context that we'll have to replay the call just to dig all the information out sometimes, right?
Yeah, don't geek out too, like, so in the initial part of the process, like, you're the business owner, you can do whatever you want. You want to spend 2 hours commiserating with the IT guy about how shitty the product they bought from this other company is, awesome. But if you're paying someone to do your lead generation, if you've got a prospector in your office that you're expecting to perform, you cannot allow them to get into the weeds and talk tech for hours on end just because it's fun for them.
Sure.
Right? There are like metrics that they have to be held accountable to, and 2-hour conversations with people that don't make decisions are not part of that process.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Reese can spend his time doing that, but your sales reps should not be doing that, because they'll never hit the numbers that they need to turn over any new business.
And I think I am taking that from a not a technical bits and bytes perspective, as I am pain and perceived value, right? I get that, and that's part of the kind of catch-22 with these co-managed deals, right? And that's why I started this off by saying that these do require, I think, at least seasoned salespeople, right? That have had.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So if you think about dividing your sales people or your sales personalities, you've got like your hunters and your closers and then your farmers, right? Like, a farmer is an account manager. There's somebody that like keeps the peace, makes sure everything's nice. Maybe they do a little cross-selling and a little upselling, right? But they are not aggressive hunters. They're not aggressive at all. And their job isn't to be aggressive. Their job is to problem solve, right? Your hunters are usually displacement sales reps that have aggressive goals, and they don't like to take no for an answer, and they're not going to be patient. They're what I would call fast sales cycle agents. So if you've got a hunter who's full sales cycle responsible, and you have them in charge of sales that extend past about a 3 to 6 month period, that person is going to fail.
Yeah.
Right? The hunters are not long sales cycle reps.
Right.
Farmers are long sales cycle reps, but they're not aggressive, and they need a process. Yeah. They're not creative either. Right. Then you get your closers, and your closers are usually your highest paid, most technical sales asset. So that might be the business owner, or it might be a sales engineer, but it's somebody where if they're going to sit down and talk to someone, they had better be ready to go. Right. You don't want to waste that person's time in look-see tire kicker meetings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So different kind of asset. And I would argue that most companies at the $2 to $3 million mark cannot afford a closer. So it's going to be the business owner.
Sure.
Right. Like, closers make $250,000 a year. So if you want to steal one from somewhere else, Okay, but most of the time you're going to end up building one from an asset that you already have. They're going to grow along with your business.
Yeah.
So,
Carrie, question for you.
yep.
So when I have tried to do outbound, not for co-manage, when I've tried to do outbound dialing in the past with my hunters, farmers, whatever, we failed miserably. And I think one of the things that always resonated with me in what you guys do is that you identify down to the personality traits of the people that make good outbound dialers. Do you ever talk to MSPs that have an absolute savage hunter killer and he's also doing effective outbound dialing?
We have, we've worked with, I want to say 1,000 MSPs almost over the course of the last 7 years. So everybody has something that's a little bit, there are anomalies everywhere, but if I was going to hire for that role,
yeah,
I wouldn't hire if I was going to hire somebody to prospect for co-managed opportunities, I don't want to think about what the product or the service that they've sold in the past. I want to think about the sales cycles that they've managed. Right. So it isn't about, do they understand IT, or do they understand, are they able to nurture an opportunity? Do they have the attention to detail? Do they have the process orientation? Can they handle the kind of the feast famine lifestyle that comes along with only closing 4 deals a year? Right. So if you have a hunter right now, an aggressive hunter that's closing a deal that's worth $5,000 a month, and he's closing 2 a quarter, great. But is that guy going to be the same guy that can be patient enough through a 3-year sale? Probably not. So you're looking at probably moving into the enterprise space if you want to poach. And unfortunately, the enterprise space is filled with people who are making more money than you want to pay them, right? So you're not going to steal somebody who's making a killing working somewhere else. Like great hunters or great closers have been in the business for a long time. They know their worth. And if they're unemployed, there's a reason for that. So I want to be super suspect of anyone that says they're a great closer. I want to figure out why they're not in the job that they used to be in, because there's a story there for sure.
That's a great point, Carrie. That's a great point.
Like good hunters don't move. Like think about like when you look at like Joe Panettieri's channel E2E updates, for example, and you're looking at the movement in the channel of the enterprise level companies that are supporting you. How often do you see a senior, like how often does a channel chief leave?
Rare, and when they do, it's a big deal, right?
Yeah, and we're all gossiping about it behind their backs, right? Like something happened.
Yeah.
Right. So if you've got a resume and it looks like it's solid gold, there is a story there. So do your research before you interview that person. Get on LinkedIn, get on the internet, start Googling them, Google their name, Google their phone number, Google like everything you can about them, right? Like you can't really start talking. You can't ask for references in the US, but you can do a ton of research long before you talk to that person. So I had an applicant today. We're trying to hire a marketing coordinator right now. Had an applicant today, way overqualified, pristine resume, talking about how they retired 5 years ago and they just aren't ready for retirement yet. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, I don't really want to penalize anyone for being overqualified. But a couple of minutes on Google, like that guy left 15 of the jobs that he's had off of his resume. He's changed jobs every 6 months for the last 10 years. This isn't somebody I want on my team, right? That resume looked great, but 5 minutes on Google showed me why he was unemployed. Right. So you want to think about that before you bring a third party into your organization to sell for you at any time. But especially when you're looking at a project like this, where the deals might not close for years. What do you need to learn before you can hire someone who's going to manage a multi-year sales process, especially if you aren't a sales oriented person already? Right. So Reese, you're a sales guy. You've been a sales guy since you started your business. You understand the sales process. You understand the sales cycle, right? You're just starting to look at things like key performance indicators. And I know that because we talked about it, but you're developing the metrics by which you're going to measure the performance of the people you bring into your business after.
Yes.
If you don't know those numbers yet for smaller deals, you certainly don't know how to measure them for larger deals. So before you bring in a sales rep who's going to take you for a 2-year ride, make sure you understand your numbers and know what you're looking for in the process long before the sale happens.
Yes.
So think about, that's a whole new webinar. That's a whole other webinar. I'm getting way in the weeds here.
Yeah,
But
I know, and it's you're man, you're dropping some gems on them here, Carrie. It's one of the reasons why we're here today is that as I was evaluating these things, maybe 5-6 months ago, I reached out to Carrie and said, "Look, I've got some things that are working for me, but I'm in muscle and feel. It's in here. It's me. I kind of know, but I need to take this out of me and transfer these skills to other people." And through this journey, we figured out there are some things that are going to transfer. There's some things that may not. And there's going to be some places where there'll be bleed over. But to Carrie's point, and I'll call myself out. I'll put myself on notice here. Carrie's called me out asking me metrics that I should know off the top of my head that I did. And that goes to the level of granularity that sales professionals are looking at these things. Mm-hmm. Their churn on deals, their attrition on that kind of stuff. It's very, very important.
Yeah. So before we go like right down that rabbit hole again, let's get back to what we're trying to teach people about today. Yeah. So co-managed closing, right? So having never closed a co-managed deal before, I don't really have a lot to contribute on this. So things like, when do you ask for the sale? So at what point, like, remember, Reese, you said just a couple of minutes ago that if you are overly aggressive and you push too hard too fast, you're going to lose that deal. So when is the right time to ask for the sale? And what do you focus on?
Yeah, that's again, the mileage may vary in these individual scenarios, Carrie. But what I'm finding is we'll do an intro appointment, right? Maybe before that, we send them a little wow box or some documents about us. Do some LinkedIn connections, LinkedIn sleuthing to kind of get the groundwork. Have a really strong first meeting, uncover some pain and maybe some active or latent needs, and then get more people involved. Okay, now is this second call the one where I get my technical people involved? You get your IT director involved. We clear scope. We agree. Okay, there's 4 things we talked about, but 365. You guys will hear me anchor to that because that is what we're finding success on. Okay, that 365 project, that has been the thing that has held y'all back, right? And that's the thing y'all are worried about in the profile migrations. Let's tackle that. Let's show you value. Let me take your 365 billing over. Maybe we roll out security then. Maybe we phase that out. But get everybody on the same page. Quote it out. I am finding that these co-managed opportunities, when we send them a polished quote platform, embed a video, and I've sent them referrals and stuff, they really like that kind of professional aesthetic to it, right? And then once we onboard them, Carrie, this is one of the most important parts with any deal, but particularly with these co-managed deals, a white glove experience on the rollout of that project. Painless, right? Over communicate. So knocking, and that's what I set out that I'm going to make you a raving fan of my company. That is my goal from the onset. We're going to knock this project out of the park, and then we can talk about the other stuff, right? But let's handle that active need. So showing them value, but then asterisk getting MRR with showing them value, and then expanding, like land and then expand. Where I'd come into a managed service deal, Carrie, and I'd be like, we're ripping all this shit out. It's $250 a user. Signing today, a 4-year deal. Let's go.
But we just bought these. Don't care.
Yeah, it's a little different when they're like, yeah, this is a $40,000 Palo Alto firewall. We're not gonna just throw that out, right? Maybe we roadmap that out a little bit. So, yeah, that's the biggest deal. Is I would say it's going to be harder to get that at bat. Once you get it, a win. Whether it's the project, an active need. Something that ties recurring revenue to it. You can come in and position yourself as a security expert, and that's something none of these co-managed IT people have any experience about. It's stuff that leadership's telling them, hey, you need to implement KnowBe4. Hey, you need to implement XYZ. And they're just like, yeah, well, we have all these projects and servers we're adminning. So if you can carve off a piece that they don't want, right, that's the win. You get their momentum behind it. You get the department's momentum behind it. You and the department sit down with leadership, and then you talk about what this is going to look like. And I think, to that point, Bob Coppage has awesome content and is an authority in this space of, he's got some good content about that triangulation of this conversation that you're having. now versus just a one-to-one relationship you'd be having with an MSP. So you really you have to think about this and just through a different lens, right? To Carrie's point, the leadership is probably not going to be aware of everything until you bring these things to light.
So what I want people thinking about is like back in the day when you started your IT company, there were very few companies that like now we take like Born in the Cloud or whatever, but you started your IT company and you weren't selling managed, or at least you're not selling the managed services that you are now. You were selling a managed services stack, but maybe you were a little flexible on price because you wanted to win the deal, or you were selling something that kind of represented managed services, but you weren't quite there yet, right? Like you had to make a decision that you were going to be a managed services provider and not a VAR, right? And then I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with either business model. I know a lot much bigger VARs than I do MSPs. So, right, like you're essentially kind of going back into the VAR space at this point, right? You're going to be the guy that sells the licenses to the company, right? So it's a different headspace, and it's a thing when you think about what you had to do to get to become an MSP. You had to be willing to get rid of things that were out of scope, right? Like you had to be willing to get rid of those first clients who no longer fit your business practice. You had to be willing to get rid of the sales team that no longer fit your business practice, right? Like the person that helped you get to 1 million is not the person that's going to help you get to 10. And the co-managed opportunities are going to take attention and time away from your current practice. So if you haven't got your ducks in a row, and you said this right at the beginning of the webinar, if you haven't even figured out managed services yet, you got no business bothering those people about co-managed. Get your shit together, right? And then think about new ways to build your business, right? If you're not there yet, if it's just you and 3 techs, you don't even belong on this webinar. You are not ready for this, right? I don't mean to be an asshole by saying that, but you're putting the cart before the horse at this point. You got to button down one offering and one thing that you do. Like we do one thing, we do it real well, right? We do telemarketing for MSPs between this space and this space. And if I want to go play in the co-managed space, I have to completely change how I run my business, which means now I'm training multiple types of agents and I'm training to multiple processes. I now have the responsibility of completely different pods in my business. Like right now, it's just rinse and repeat. I could read a book and sell my services to you at the same time because it never changes. My talk track never changes. My callers, they could probably do that too because their talk track never changes either. You're about to open yourself up to a whole new way of doing things. And you've just got to the point where you're like, Reese, at what point would you have said like, yeah, we got this down. We understand managed services now. We understand how to sell it. And we understand how to deliver it.
Probably right before COVID, February 2020. No, I would say probably 2019 is kind of when we had our shit together and hit past 2 million and became. So I joined a peer group in 2018, and that really made a lot of fundamental change. It set us up for a great 2019, and it was with that momentum that I really started pushing forward. And getting into the co-managed space, guys, I'll tell you, we did a little over 2.5 last year. Did an acquisition where we're going to be at close to 3.5 million this year in revenue, and we're on the lower side of the size of companies that are tackling these co-managed deals. Right, I've gone up against some other ones that were $5-10 million shops, but here's the perfect part of this. A lot of these are not active hand raisers, Carrie. I'm going to them, right? That's the opportunity here that our audience, I hope that y'all can take away, is that like the co-managed opportunities that I'm capturing, they're not banging on Techvera's door. Techvera is coming to them. So your MSP can do that as well.
Yeah, just go looking.
Yes.
Open season now on large opportunities.
That's right.
Hey, guys, I want to respect everyone's time. We hit time, and normally, like, we do all the content and then we do the Q&A, but we all got dragged into the weeds here today. I do have some more time. We're like, Reese, I don't know what your time is like. I can stay here for another 10 minutes or so if And anyone else, you know what? This will be available on demand. If you have to hop off right now, carry on.
You know, you had just mentioned something there that was open season, guys. I'm of an abundance mindset here, and that was a very huge shift that I had in my mind when we converted from break fix that was very territorial, and I didn't want to collaborate with any of my peers in 2014 to going to a managed service kind of model and joining peer groups and sharing information. There's a lot of low hanging fruit out there. Okay, there's lots of opportunities, and the businesses that are in this space, they're in flex. It doesn't matter. They don't have to be growing for this to be a worthwhile endeavor for them to explore.
Yeah, I don't want to discourage anyone from going after large opportunities either, but I want to make sure like one bad onboard. So you think about the brand that you build and the reputation that you build, right? There's a reason that I don't onboard companies that aren't a good fit for us. And
Sure.
It's because when it doesn't work out, it's not because that company was a bad company. It was because managed sales pros had no business supporting that business to begin with, right? So if somebody's going to go trash talk me on Reddit or somewhere, right? Like I have to own that. I shouldn't have worked with that company to begin with. So once you build out your process and you've got it to the point where you can spin up a bulletproof network and carry on with your life without stress, now you've got to think about, okay, how are we going to staff for opportunities that we don't have any understanding of how long it's going to take to close them.
Yeah.
Right. So now you're trying to forecast in a space that you don't understand. You're trying to create a bench of talent and potentially sales to support the new growth of your business, and you don't understand it. So you spent a lot of time building out KPIs that you understand for your help desk, for example, right? Like, you know how long it should take to handle a ticket that looks like this, right? And you know how to scale that. Same with the sales process. Once you figure out, like my sales cycle is 2 years long. People come to me, they decide I'm too expensive, they go work with one of my competitors or they try it in-house, they get screwed around a couple of times and they come back to me.
Yeah.
I got to be patient, right? So you need to know your sales numbers and figure out the first batch and then move on to the second. But the conversations that you're going to have with these people are going to be significantly different. Like if you think about the sales stories that you tell, Reese, right? Like everybody has those like lean in moments, right? Like you're talking to people and you've got the great stories that you've managed to hone over people's responses over the past few years. Like my sales pitch doesn't vary very much. If I'm now going to take that up to a different audience, I got to change all my jokes, right? Like I can't have the same conversation with the owner of a $2 million business as I will with the general manager of a 500 person business. Their priorities are different. And the biggest difference is at 2 million, it's my money. And at 500, it's somebody else's money and someone's writing a check that they don't have to personally cover, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a very different sales process when you're playing with someone else's cash. So you're also thinking about things at scale at that point.
And at scale at that point, you could have department level budgets, right? And that's stuff you'll find out through co-managed discovery. Yeah, we have where they'll literally tell you, we're supposed to replace the server in the next 6 months. We budgeted XYZ. Like that's the level of maturity you'll get with your average co-managed deal versus the guy that's like, I don't know, it's the box in the corner. It's just a night and day difference.
So just think about the language that you're using and the words you use to describe what you're trying to achieve, or more importantly, what they are trying to achieve. Right. So if you think about how you're going to talk to somebody about the cost savings of managed over hiring an in-house IT person, right? You're going to have conversations about, well, we've got 12 different certifications in our shop and your guy only has one. And he got it 15 years ago and he hasn't done any upgrading since, right? Like there are conversations that you're going to have around like, you get everything that we know compared to, the one thing that this guy knows.
Well,
right?
you had mentioned the kind of mentality of thinking of kind of slipping back into that VAR mentality. I want to put a caveat to that, right? So when you are dealing with a co-managed prospect and you uncover that they don't have an RMM right now, but they're exploring it, Then you uncover what they're doing to explore. What vendors are they looking at? Everyone that's on this call that has a technical mind knows that when they sell you the RMM, they're like, Carrie, I'm going to sell you lab tech. You're going to flip a switch. Everything's going to work, right? That's not the case. Think about how much time you've spent over the last years as an MSP developing scripts, batch automation, all that knowledge, all that experience you have as a subject matter expert in that tool. You can now position that in a co-managed cell. Okay. Let's cut the BS out. You're not going to have to source vendors, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to get you on the best-in-class tool stack that my best-in-class MSP uses, and you're going to have my team as a backup as you roll that out. I'm going to build dashboards for you against that, and I'm going to give you access to our script repository, which is IP, by the way. And we're going to move forward, right? Value, value, value. Think of how much easier you've made that sysadmin's life that was already working 45, 50 hours a week. He's not going to have to spend his weekends learning lab techs or automate, whatever they call it now. So it's just
remember, if you hate it, they're going to hate it 500 times as much.
Yes. Yeah. So we're dealing with a lot of people that have a lot of similar pains and woes, guys. It's just figuring out how you can help them alleviate those pains and then going up the ladder collectively to fix things.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to skip the rest of the slides because we covered most of the content through Q&A. I'm going to stop making slides. I'm just going to put up a picture.
We can just riff, Carrie.
Yeah.
Carrie is such a wealth of knowledge, guys. Through my career in IT, and I think my first IT Nation was probably 2014, 2015. That's when I first started reaching out to you. So to see the evolution of her company in the industry and her wealth of knowledge, and she's been very helpful as I've grown my MSP, the content she's put out, and the road shows back in the day, pre-COVID.
I miss trade shows.
I do too.
I miss skipping sessions and hanging out on the patio.
So I was going to say the follow-up to this will be live in person at the next IT conference. If there is a cigar bar or cigar area, you'll find Carrie there and probably me shortly after. So
yeah,
you'll see us at these events, guys. We're both accessible. If you have questions about this, don't hesitate to reach out and we can talk.
And if you're pursuing things that aren't co-managed, because as I said earlier, that's not our sweet spot. How about you go after the co-managed stuff and you send your 20 to 50 seat hunting over to Managed Sales Pros?
That is right.
We can help you build your playbook. We can help train you or your team to prospect better. We can do the prospecting for you, or we can help you build out that process that you're going to follow in-house. And we can help you build process to sell co-managed. We're just not in the business of prospecting for it ourselves. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Finally finished my book. It only took 3 months in Mexico, but it is ready to go. And if you'd like a copy of it, you can email us at hello@managedsalespros.com. It will not help you sell co-managed IT, but it will help you sell managed opportunities up to about the 70-seat space. Reese, thank you so much for joining me. As always, it's been a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you, Carrie. We'll see you next time.
Thanks to everyone for staying a little bit later. And this will be available on our website on demand, probably in a couple of days after I get it downloaded, uploaded to YouTube, and moved over to our server. So thanks, everyone. Have a great evening and happy selling.
We'll see you later. Take care.